The galaxy had seen many strange peace treaties, but none stranger than this one. The Sarathian Empire, a proud alien monarchy, had been at odds with the human alliance for decades. Skirmishes over trade routes, disputes about territory, and old grudges had kept both sides tense. Yet now both governments had agreed to an unusual gesture of peace. King Serath of the Sarathian Empire had announced that his only daughter, Princess Lysera, would be given in marriage to a human. The chosen man was Captain Elias Vance, a decorated officer of the Human Alliance who had served as a diplomat for the past 3 years. Elias was known for his calm mind and unshakable patience. When the announcement reached him, he was surprised, not because of the honor, but because of the rumors surrounding the princess. Across the galaxy, it was whispered that Lysera was infertile. The union, people said, was purely symbolic, a way for the king to show that he could trust a human enough to let one join the royal family. Elias arrived on the Sarathian homeworld aboard a shining silver diplomatic shuttle. From the moment he stepped onto the palace landing platform, he felt the weight of 1,000 eyes watching him. Sarathians were taller than humans, with pale silver skin that shimmered faintly in light, and eyes that glowed softly in shades of blue or green. Their movements were graceful, almost like flowing water. Palace guards in gold armor led him through wide corridors decorated with alien banners. The air carried the scent of strange flowers and faint metallic tones. Everything around him spoke of a civilization that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. At last, he was brought to the grand hall. High crystal arches rose above him, and in the center, the Sarathian king sat upon a throne of carved stone and light. King Serath was broad-shouldered, with eyes like cold steel. Beside him stood Princess Lysera. She was unlike anyone Elias had ever seen. Her long hair shimmered like strands of liquid silver, and her eyes held a deep emerald hue. There was beauty in her face, but also something else, a heaviness, as if she carried a secret that weighed her down. She greeted him with a polite nod, though her gaze did not linger on his. The ceremony was short. Words were spoken in both Sarathian and standard human language, vows exchanged, and hands joined before the court. There was no warmth in the king's expression, only formality. When it was over, Elias and Lysera were led away to private chambers prepared for them. In the quiet of those chambers, Elias tried to speak with her. "I know this marriage is for peace," he said gently. "But I hope we can at least understand each other." Lysera's voice was soft but steady. "You are far from home, Captain Vance. You will find that the palace can be unwelcoming." Elias gave a small smile. "I've been in stranger places." But her eyes betrayed no amusement. "You may think you understand, but here, every word is heard, every step watched. I am the king's daughter, yet I am not free. That night." Elias lay awake, thinking about her words. He had faced danger before, but this felt different. There was a sense of silent hostility in the palace halls. Servants avoided his eyes. Guards seemed to follow his movements. He wondered if the rumors about her infertility were true, and if so, why she seemed so guarded. Days turned into weeks. Elias attended official banquets and council meetings, always under the watchful gaze of the king. Lysera was always present, always polite, but never fully open. They spoke in short conversations, each one carefully measured. One evening, while walking through the palace gardens, Elias found her alone, staring at the strange night sky. Stars here were brighter, larger, and seemed closer than those from Earth. "You seem far away," Elias said, stepping beside her. Lysera glanced at him. "I am thinking about the future. Or rather, the future I was told I could never have." Her voice was quiet, but the words hung heavy in the air. Elias knew she was speaking of the rumors. I don't believe everything I hear, he replied. She gave a faint, almost sad smile. In this case, the whispers are true, or so I was told. Elias studied her profile under the alien moonlight. She seemed fragile in that moment, yet there was a strength in her tone. He wanted to ask more, but she turned and began walking back toward the palace. The following days brought more subtle tension. At a council meeting, Elias caught glimpses of Sarathian nobles exchanging uneasy glances whenever he spoke. Once, in a quiet corridor, he overheard two guards speaking in their own language, their tones sharp, their eyes narrowing as he passed. He didn't understand the full meaning, but he recognized the distrust. Still, there were moments when Lysera would let her guard down slightly. One morning, while sharing a meal in their private chambers, she told him about the Sarathian gardens that had existed since before their empire even touched the stars. Another time, she laughed softly at one of his awkward attempts to eat a traditional Sarathian dish. These moments were rare, but they gave him hope. Then, one evening, a storm swept across the capital, rain that shimmered like liquid crystal, lightning that moved in slow, branching patterns across the sky. Lysera stood by the window watching in silence. Elias joined her. In my world, he said, storms like this mean change is coming. Lysera looked at him for a long moment. Perhaps it is. Something in her tone made him wonder what she meant. That night, for the first time since his arrival, Elias dreamed, not of home, but of the Sarathian palace, the strange stars above. It and Lysera standing in the gardens looking toward a horizon he could not yet see. He did not know it yet, but the gift that had been given to him, this marriage that was meant to be only a symbol, would soon become the most dangerous truth in the galaxy. The days after the crystal storm were quiet, but something had changed. Elias could not explain it, yet he felt it in the way Lysera moved, the way she spoke, and in the faint color that had returned to her cheeks. She began waking early, often, walking alone in the gardens before the palace servants had even started their day. Her steps were slower than before, as if she carried an invisible weight. Elias noticed she sometimes paused mid-sentence, placing a hand gently on her stomach as though checking for something. At first, he thought it might be exhaustion from the constant political pressure around them. The palace was still filled with silent suspicion toward him. Even the king's glances felt sharper. But the change in Lysera was not the same as weariness. It was something else. One morning, Elias entered the dining chamber to find Lysera pushing away her plate, her silver hair falling forward as she held her head in her hands. "Are you unwell?" Elias asked, stepping closer. She shook her head, lightly. "It is nothing. A little dizziness." Elias studied her face. There was no sickness in her skin, no sign of fever. If anything, her eyes seemed brighter. "You should see the royal physician," he said. Lysera hesitated. "That would only bring questions I am not ready to answer." Her words puzzled him, but before he could ask more, a messenger arrived, calling them both to attend an audience with the king. In the throne room, King Sarath spoke of trade matters, of the upcoming celebration to honor the treaty between their peoples. Elias stood beside Lysera, but his mind kept drifting back to the image of her at the table that morning. She had been pale, yet there was an unusual energy in her gaze, like something new had awakened within her. That evening, after the audience ended, Elias found her again in the gardens. The alien moonlight washed over her face, and the silver leaves above them whispered softly in the night wind. "I think something is happening to me," Lysera said at last, her voice low. "What kind of something?" Elias asked carefully. "I feel different. My body feels different. There is a warmth inside me, a rhythm I have never known." She hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. "It cannot be what I think it is." My people said it would never happen for me. A thought came to Elias that he almost didn't dare to speak aloud. You think you might be? She silenced him with a quick shake of her head. Do not say it. If we speak it too soon, it will break. But over the next few days, the signs became clearer. Lysera tired easily but seemed almost peaceful. Her appetite returned, but her tastes had changed. She favored fruits she once ignored and avoided dishes she had loved before. She visited the gardens even more often, as if drawn to life and growth. Finally, Elias could no longer ignore the truth. One night, as they sat in the quiet of their private chambers, he said softly, "We need to know. We need to be certain." Lysera looked at him with a mixture of hope and fear. If we are certain, the entire court will know, and if the court knows, the king will know. He will not rejoice at this news. Still, Elias insisted, let us go to someone we can trust. Lysera thought for a long moment before nodding. There is one, the royal physician, Madron. He has served my family since before I was born. If there is truth in my feeling, he will find it. The next morning, they visited Madron under the excuse of a routine health check. The physician, tall and calm, welcomed them into his private chambers lined with shelves of glowing instruments. He examined Lysera with a care that spoke of long years of loyalty. When he finished, he stepped back, his expression unreadable at first. Then, slowly, his eyes widened, and his voice came in a whisper. It is true. The princess carries life. Elias felt his breath catch. Even knowing it might be possible, hearing the words struck him like a wave. Lysera sat very still, her eyes fixed on the floor as if afraid to believe. This is not only rare, Madron continued. It is impossible by all Sarathian science. No union between our people and humans has ever produced life, and yet, he placed a gentle hand over his chest. And yet here it is? Lysera's voice was soft. If the king hears of this too soon, Madron nodded. You must be careful. Many in the court will see this child as a miracle. Others will see it as a threat to the throne. That night, Elias could hardly sleep. His thoughts spun between joy and fear. He had never imagined his marriage, meant only as a political gesture, could lead to this. And yet here was the truth. He and Lysera had done what no one thought possible. But the news did not stay hidden for long. A week later, during a formal dinner in the Hall of Stars, Lysera excused herself early. As she left, a sharp-eyed noblewoman noticed the faint curve in her waist, a detail small but impossible to hide from trained eyes. Whispers began, soft at first, then growing as they passed from one noble to another. By the end of the night, Elias felt the change in the air. The glances toward him were sharper, heavier. The king's gaze lingered on Lysera as she returned to the table, his expression unreadable but cold. The next morning, Madron arrived at their chambers with a grim look. The rumor has reached the council, he said quietly. You must prepare yourselves. The king will summon you soon. And when he does, the truth will no longer be yours alone. Lysera stood by the window, her hands resting protectively over her stomach. The moment I feared has come, she whispered. Elias stepped beside her. Whatever comes, we face it together. She looked at him then, truly looked at him, and for the first time since their wedding, there was no wall between them. Then we must be strong, for this child, and for what it means. Outside, the Sarathian sun rose slowly over the palace, its light turning the silver towers to gold. But within those walls, shadows were already gathering. The king's summons came sooner than Elias expected. At dawn, 2 guards in gold armor appeared at their chamber doors. His Majesty calls for you, one said with no warmth in his voice. Elias and Lysera exchanged a glance. She placed a hand on her stomach briefly, as if drawing strength, and then nodded for Elias to follow. The throne room was filled with nobles, advisors, and high-ranking officers. The king sat in his towering seat, the light from the crystal arches casting sharp patterns over his face. His eyes locked on Elias, cold and sharp like blades of ice. "It has reached my ears," King Serath began, "that my daughter carries life." His voice carried across the hall, firm but without joy. "And that the father of this life is a human." No one moved. The silence was thick. Lysera stepped forward, her voice calm but steady. "It is true, father. I am with child." The king's jaw tightened. "You were told since your youth that such a thing was impossible, and yet here we stand. Do you know what this means?" "Yes," Lysera replied. "It means our people are not as close to the stars as we thought. It means, the king interrupted, his voice rising slightly, "that the future of my empire may be shaped by human blood. That is no small matter, daughter." Elias felt the tension like a storm ready to break. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "this child can be a bridge between our peoples. It could strengthen the alliance." But the king's gaze cut through him. "Or it could divide my empire." A low murmur rose from the nobles. Some nodded at the king's words. Others whispered to each other with curiosity. The king leaned, back in his throne. "From this moment you will remain within the inner wing of the palace. Your movements will be watched. Until I decide what is to be done, the matter will stay within these walls." Elias understood the meaning. They were now prisoners, though the king had not spoken the word. Life in the inner wing was suffocating. Guards stood at every entrance, and even the servants seemed afraid to speak openly. Lysera's walks in. The gardens were forbidden. She could only watch the sky through the narrow balcony of their chambers, but word of the child had already begun to slip beyond the palace walls. In the city, merchants whispered about the miracle heir, and small groups of citizens gathered in marketplaces, debating what it could mean. Inside the palace, the court was dividing. Some nobles, especially the younger ones, saw the unborn heir as a sign of renewal, proof that the Sarathian race could grow beyond its limits. Others, older and more rigid, called it an insult to the bloodline. One evening, Elias sat at the edge of the balcony staring at the alien stars. Lysera joined him quietly. "My father will not accept this easily," she said. "He has ruled too long with the belief that purity of blood is strength. This child challenges that belief." Elias turned to her. "If he cannot be convinced, then we have to protect ourselves another way." Lysera gave a small, bitter smile. "In this palace, even walls have ears." As if to prove her point, the very next day an accident occurred. A heavy crystal ornament in the corridor fell from its stand just as Elias was passing. It shattered on the floor inches from his feet. The guards claimed it was an error in placement, but Elias saw the quick glance two of them exchanged. It was not an error. After that, he kept closer to Lysera at all times. The tension in the air was almost a living thing. 2 weeks later, the king summoned them again, this time privately in his strategy chamber. Maps of star systems lined the walls, and the faint glow of tactical screens lit the room. "You both must understand something," King Serath said, his voice low but firm. "This child, if born, will be claimed as mine, as a Sarathian heir. It will be raised under my control, without human influence." Lysera's eyes widened. "You mean to take my child from me?" The king did not answer directly. "The stability of my empire depends on its ruler being shaped in the ways of my people. A half-human child raised by human customs would be a danger to that stability." Elias stepped forward, his voice calm but his hands clenched. "Your Majesty, with all respect, that is not your choice to make." The king's gaze was like stone. "It is my empire. Everything within it is my choice." That night, Lysera paced their chambers in silence. Finally, she turned to Elias. "He will not stop. When the time comes, he will take the child." Elias knew she was right. "Then we can't let him decide our future. We need allies." Lysera thought for a moment. "There is someone, a scientist on the council. His name is Viel. He has long spoken of our people's need for genetic renewal. If anyone could help us, it would be him." "They sent a secret message through one of the few servants they still trusted," Viel replied quickly, asking to meet in a storage hall beneath the old wing of the palace. When they met, Viel was cautious, glancing over his shoulder often. "You understand the danger of speaking to me," he said. "If the king learns, we will all pay for it." "We need protection," Elias said. "And we need time." Viel studied them both. "I believe your child could be the key to ending the infertility that has weakened our race for generations. If that truth were known, to the people, the king could not hide it. But we must be careful. Evidence must be shown, and it must reach beyond the palace." Lysera's voice was steady. "Then help us gather it." Viel nodded slowly. "I will try. But you must prepare for what comes next. The moment the king sees the people turning in your favor, he will act." In the weeks that followed, Elias felt the noose tightening. The king's eyes were sharper in council meetings. Servants they had trusted suddenly avoided them. The air in the palace seemed colder, and yet there was also a quiet hope. Whispers from the city that the unborn child might be the answer to the empire's fading future. Elias knew the time was coming when silence would no longer protect them. In the grand halls of the Sarathian palace, war was already brewing, not with ships and weapons, but with secrets, alliances, and the future of an entire species hanging in the balance. The hidden meetings with Vale continued in silence and shadow. He never visited the same place twice, and always arrived as if he had been walking a different path entirely. Elias admired the man's caution. In the Sarathian palace, even walls seemed to remember secrets. One night, in the storage hall lit only by faint crystal lamps, Viel placed a small glowing cylinder on the table. "I have something for you," he said quietly. "I took a sample of the princess's blood from her last official examination. I ran tests that have not been used in centuries." Elias leaned forward. "And?" Viel's silver eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Your child's genetic pattern is unlike anything we have recorded. The human half has awakened dormant traits in Sarathian DNA, traits that were lost generations ago. This is why the pregnancy is possible. It is not just rare. It is a renewal." Lysera's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the cylinder. "Then, this child could end the infertility in our people?" "Yes," Viel said firmly. "If studied, if the truth is shared, our race could survive. Without it, we face slow decline. But your father will not see it this way. He will guard the old ways, even if it means our end." Elias frowned. "You think he will still try to take the child?" Viel's voice dropped lower. "Not think. I know. The king has already given secret orders to the royal custodian guard. When the child is born, it will be removed from you under the claim of imperial safety." Lysera's breath caught. "And raised as his own heir?" "Yes," Viel said, his eyes grave. "And once the child is in his care, you will have no way to reach it again." Elias felt the weight of those words like a stone in his chest. He looked at Lysera, who now stood completely still, her hands resting protectively over her stomach. Then we can't wait. We have to act before he does. For the next week, Elias and Lysera moved carefully, speaking to no one about their plans. Viel worked in secret, gathering scientific proof of the child's genetic uniqueness. His plan was bold, to broadcast the evidence across the empire so the people would see the child as their salvation, not as a threat. But time was running out. The king's behavior grew colder. His summons to Elias became sharp interrogations disguised as polite conversations. Guards now stood not only at their doors, but inside their chambers. One evening, while the sun was setting in ribbons of silver and blue, Lysera stood by the balcony. "He is tightening the walls around us," she said softly. "Soon, there will be no gap to escape through." Elias joined her. "Then we make our own gap." 2 nights later, Viel sent a message. "Meet in the archives room at the old West Tower. Midnight." Elias and Lysera slipped away through servant corridors, avoiding the main halls. The archives room was silent, lined with shelves of old star charts and sealed records. Viel was already there, holding a small projection device. "This," he said, activating the display, "is the evidence. It shows the genetic renewal in detail, explained so that even a child could understand. Once released, it cannot be denied or hidden. The people will demand the child be protected, and the king cannot go against them without risking revolt." Lysera studied the floating symbols and diagrams. "If we do this, we will be declaring ourselves against my father." Viel nodded. "Yes, and once you do, there will be no going back." Elias glanced between them. "Then we don't wait any longer. How soon can you send it?" Viel hesitated. "It must be done from outside the palace's main network. If I try from here, it will be traced and stopped before it spreads. I can arrange for you to reach a secure relay station in the outer city, but it will be dangerous." Lysera straightened. "Dangerous or not, we will go." The opportunity came sooner than expected. A ceremonial event in the city was planned for the next day, and the king ordered Elias and Lysera to attend, a public appearance to show unity. Viel found them just before they departed. "I have hidden the device in the folds of your ceremonial robe," he whispered to Lysera. "Once you are in the city, there will be a moment when the guard patrol is distracted by the crowd. That is your only chance to slip away." Elias kept his face calm as they entered the royal transport. Inside, however, every step felt like it could trigger disaster. The city streets were alive with banners and the sound of alien music. Citizens waved from the sides, unaware of the tension that hung over their honored guests. As the transport slowed for the public greeting, a cheer rose, and in that moment of noise and distraction, Elias guided Lysera down a side street, their ceremonial guards momentarily blocked by the crowd. The relay station was hidden behind a trade shop. Viel's contact, a quiet Sarathian woman with sharp eyes, welcomed them inside and locked the door. "This will take only a minute," she said, taking the device from Lysera. "Once sent, it will reach every channel, public, private, and even the outer colonies." Elias held his breath as the woman activated the relay. The projection data shimmered in the air, then vanished into the transmitter. "It is done," she said. "By now, half the empire has seen it." Lysera's voice was quiet, but certain. "Then the king will know, and so will everyone else." They slipped back into the palace late that evening, just as the ceremonial guards returned from the city. No one questioned their absence, yet. But the next morning, the storm arrived. The king summoned them to the throne room, his expression carved from stone. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the faint hum of the crystal walls. "You have taken my choice from me," he said, his voice cold but even. "You have spread your message to the empire without my consent." Elias met his gaze. "We told the truth. The king rose slowly from his throne. Truth is a weapon as sharp as any blade, and you have used it against me. Lysira's hands tightened around her robe. It is not against you, father. It is for our people. The king's eyes hardened. Then you will learn that for the throne, there is no difference. Night covered the city of Zareth in a deep silver glow. The royal palace, with its high crystal towers and glowing spires, seemed peaceful from the outside. But inside, fear and urgency moved like a hidden storm. Elias stood at the balcony of their chamber, staring at the alien moon. He knew this might be their last night in the palace. Lysira sat near the bed, her hand resting on her stomach. She was 7 months pregnant now, and the child had grown stronger with each passing day. She could feel gentle movements inside her, each one a reminder of the miracle that had brought them both hope. But tonight, hope was mixed with danger. A loyal guard named Kalen entered quietly. His green-scaled skin shimmered faintly in the dim light. "We must move now," he said, his voice low but firm. "The king's hunters will receive orders within hours. Once they begin, there will be no safe place in the palace for you or the princess." Elias nodded. He had already packed a small case with basic supplies: water, nutrient packs, and a compact human communicator. Lysira wore a dark travel cloak that covered her features, her royal ornaments replaced with simple cloth. She looked at Kalen with trust. "Are you sure you can get us out?" Kalen gave a small, respectful bow. "For your child, I would risk everything." The escape began through the old maintenance tunnels beneath the palace. These tunnels were built centuries ago, long before the current king's reign, and only a few of the older guards even knew of them. The air was cold and smelled of minerals. Every step echoed softly. Elias kept one hand close to Lysira's arm, steadying her on uneven ground. They reached a service hatch that opened into the city's lower districts. The streets here were dark, crowded, and far less guarded than the royal district. Alien merchants were closing their stalls, and the night markets buzzed with low voices and strange scents. To blend in, Kalen led them through side alleys, avoiding main roads where palace patrols might be searching. But danger came sooner than expected. At HFY, a narrow bridge over the aqueduct, a group of Sarathian hunters blocked the path. Their armor gleamed black, and each carried a staff weapon capable of stunning or killing with a single strike. Elias stepped in front of Lysira, his heart racing. "We don't want trouble," he said firmly. One hunter sneered. "By royal command, the princess will be returned to the palace. The human will be removed." Kalen reacted instantly. He drew his sidearm and fired 2 quick stun bursts, dropping the front guards. "Run!" he shouted. The group sprinted into the maze of streets, the sound of pursuit growing behind them. Lysira's breath came fast, but she did not slow. Her will to protect her child gave her strength. They reached the spaceport on the city's edge, where a small human diplomatic shuttle waited in a hidden docking bay. The hatch opened, revealing Consul Mara, a tall human woman with sharp eyes. "Get inside now," she urged. The shuttle's engines roared to life, lifting them into the star-filled sky. Elias looked out the window as the shining towers of Zareth shrank beneath them. For the first time in weeks, he felt a small breath of relief, but it was short-lived. A warning light flashed on the console. "Pursuit ships," Mara said grimly. "They're fast." The chase burned across the black of space. Sarathian hunter ships closed in, their weapons locking on. The shuttle's shields trembled under the first hit. Mara kept the ship weaving and rolling, but the hunters were skilled. "We can't outrun them forever," she warned. Elias's mind worked quickly. "We need to reach neutral territory. The Orion Station." Mara gave a short nod. "If we can make it there, they can't touch you without breaking treaty law." The shuttle pushed its engines to the limit, streaking toward the massive space station that floated like a silver crown in orbit above a blue gas giant. The station's defense drones lit up as they approached, warning the hunters to stand down. Reluctantly, the Sarathian ships broke away. Inside Orion Station, news had already spread. The image of the human and the pregnant alien princess walking into the central plaza drew hundreds of curious onlookers from many species. Holo reporters crowded the edges, broadcasting the scene across half the galaxy. Elias stood before the station's public council platform. His voice carried through the chamber and into every live feed. My name is Captain Elias Vance of Earth. The child my wife carries is not a threat. It is hope. It is proof that our species can survive together, stronger than before. The Sarathian people have faced the shadow of extinction for decades. This child is the first light in that darkness. The crowd murmured, their faces showing a mix of wonder and disbelief. Lysera stepped forward, placing her hand over her stomach. This is not about politics. This is about life, and life should be protected, not feared. The broadcast reached deep into the Sarathian Empire. Citizens began to demand that the royal family protect the heir instead of hiding the truth. Across the galaxy, voices rose in support of the unborn child. Back in his palace, the king watched in silence. His pride battled with the growing pressure from his own people. For the first time, he realized the tide of opinion might be beyond his control. On Orion Station, Elias and Lysera waited for the king's answer, knowing that whatever came next would decide not only their fate, but the future of two worlds. The birth chamber was quiet, except for the soft sounds of machines and whispered breaths. Lysera lay on a comfortable bed made from soft alien fabrics, her hand resting over her swollen belly. The child inside had grown strong, a sign of hope for both the Sarathian Empire and the human alliance. Elias stood close, holding her other hand tightly. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and excitement. After everything they had faced, the palace politics, the secret tests, the dangerous escape, this moment was more than just a birth. It was the start of something new. The room's doors opened gently, and a small group entered. The trusted royal physician Madron, the scientist, Vial, and a few medical assistants. Even here, in neutral space, they took no chances. Everyone knew how much was at stake. Madron smiled softly at Lysera. You are strong, princess. Soon you will meet the future of the Sarathian people. Lysera nodded, her breath steady despite the pain. I want this child to grow up free to choose who they are. Elias squeezed her hand. And we will make sure of that. Hours passed. The air was thick with tension. But then, a soft cry filled the room, a sound more powerful than any weapon or word. The child had arrived. The physician wrapped the newborn carefully, his tiny form shimmering faintly with the Sarathian silver, hue mixed with the warm color of human skin. The blend of two worlds. Madron held the child out for Lysera to see. A perfect balance, strong, healthy, and alive. Lysera smiled through tears, the weight of all their struggles lifting for a moment. Elias looked down at the child, knowing that their lives, and the lives of many others, would never be the same. News of the birth spread quickly across the galaxy. Messages of hope arrived from humans, Sarathians, and other species alike. The child was a symbol of unity, a living proof that differences could be overcome. But not everyone was happy. Back on the Sarathian homeworld, the king sat alone in his throne room. The weight of his crown felt heavier than ever. His pride had been broken, but beneath it, a new understanding slowly grew. He had fought to protect tradition, but now he saw that survival required change. The child was not a threat, but a gift. a gift from humanity, from Elias, and from Lysera. Months passed. The child named Kalen, in honor of the loyal guard who had helped them escape, grew strong and curious. His eyes shone with a bright green and blue mix, reflecting both his heritages. Elias and Lysera became ambassadors of a new era. They traveled between worlds, speaking of cooperation, hope, and the power of unity. Their story inspired many who had once doubted humans or Sarathians. On the palace grounds, the old guards who had once plotted against Elias now bowed respectfully. The nobles divided over the child slowly began to come together, seeing that the future required more than bloodlines. It needed trust and understanding. One day the king summoned Elias and Lysera to the palace once more. This time the mood was different. The great hall was filled with light and music. The Sarathian people had gathered for a ceremony unlike any before, a celebration of the new heir. King Sarath stood tall, his silver hair catching the light. He looked at the couple and then at his grandson, who sat quietly in Lysera's arms. "Kalen is the hope of our people," the king announced, his voice steady. "He carries the strength of both Sarathian and human blood. Today, we begin a new chapter, one where unity, not division, will guide us." Applause filled the hall, and many faces showed tears of joy. Elias felt a surge of pride, not just for his family, but for what humanity had helped create. As the ceremony ended, Elias and Lysera stepped outside onto the palace balcony. The stars above shone brighter than ever. Lysera whispered, "Do you think the galaxy is ready for this change?" Elias smiled. "It has to be, because Kalen's story is just the beginning. When two worlds can come together, anything is possible." She nodded, looking out at the horizon. "The future is ours to build." Together they watched the dawn break over the Sarathian Empire. A new dawn filled with hope, courage, and the promise of a better tomorrow.